Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. I am so excited for today's podcast because today we have a very special guest that I'm super excited to introduce you to. But before I introduce her to you, I want to tell you a little bit more about my bedrest experience during pregnancy. So it started out as get your feet up and get off your feet type of bed rest. And it was really early in my pregnancy. It was like 6 weeks into my pregnancy. And my reproductive endocrinologist was actually the one who first suggested it. And from there, through the rest of my pregnancy, I went through all different levels of activity restriction and ending up on total bed rest, lying upside down, connected to an IV and a catheter. So I went through the whole wide spectrum of different types of bed rest. But the thing is, I would say bedrest and I are kind of frenemies. On the one hand, I credit my activity restrictions and ultimately strict bedrest as a major factor for why I have my little guy at home with us today. But oh my gosh, it was so hard. As someone who was always on the go, I was a nonprofit exec, I was a university lecturer, I was a therapist, and I loved being busy on the weekends. I was known amongst my friends and my family as the one who just was always on the go and just couldn't sit still. Bed rest was my nightmare. It wasn't in my vocabulary. Sitting still wasn't in my vocabulary. And I just hated every moment of not being able to move, not being able to live my life the way that I'd used to, the way that I'd planned on living it for my pregnancy. I wanted to have an active pregnancy, and for so long, being on activity limitations was really, really difficult for me, and I had a really hard time just kind of accepting that new normal. And it got so bad that I swear the 13-foot ceilings we have in our family room started to feel like they were dropping on my head, and the walls were trying to crush me as they were closing in after just weeks and weeks of being at home and eventually being in the hospital. I remember going back into that same room after my son was born and being shocked at how big the room was because it had started to feel so tiny. So I am really grateful for women like Angela Davids, who founded Keep Em Cookin, which is an online forum for women who are on bed rest and who have high-risk pregnancies to meet each other, who are going through the same thing, to commiserate, to share stories of hope, and to gain inspiration from each other because of what we're going through, because it's a really unusual experience that not a lot of people understand. She also hosts a weekly chat, which I've been super honored to be a guest on, to help women learn skills on bed rest to better cope so they can actually have a healthier pregnancy. Angela Davids founded Keep Em Cookin in 2008 after experiencing 2 high-risk pregnancies and seeing a need for more educational and emotional support for women with pregnancy complications. Her professional background in journalism, marketing, and social media has helped her grow the audience of keepemcookin.com to nearly 500,000 visits per year. I'm so excited to have you on today. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited too.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in. I have so much I want to talk to you about, but let's start with tell us a little bit more about why specifically you started Keep Em Cookin.
Okay, well, both my kids were troublemakers. I called my daughter the party baby because she would not stop moving, and I had contractions all the time. So ultimately, with her, I spent 6 weeks on bed rest, and it was horrible and terrible. And I really thought about not getting pregnant again because I didn't want to go through it again.
Totally.
And so then I decided to go ahead and take the plunge and got pregnant with my son. And then I was on bed rest for him for for 16 weeks. So I
Oh
spent
my
6 weeks
goodness.
on, yes, so 6 weeks with my daughter and 16 weeks with my son. And as you know, it was one of the longest, most stressful, anxiety filled experiences I have ever had. I mean, I have never felt so lonely in my life, even with my husband, my sister, my mom, other family members, and friends coming to visit me. Just no one could possibly understand the stress that I was going
Right.
through.
Because I don't know
And I
about
know,
you, but when I was on bed rest, I used to hear all the time, well, take it easy. It's going to get so busy when the
right.
babies are home. Just put your feet up and enjoy this time. And I'm like, this is not enjoyable at all.
Yes, it's impossible because really the life of your child is at stake, and the only thing you can do is do nothing. So, yes, are so many challenges with that. And so ultimately, my son was born at 39 weeks and three
Awesome.
days with bed rest, medication, more frequent visits to my OB. So, I really had excellent care and I pushed for excellent care. And, you know, in gratitude for my son getting here safely, I said, if there's something I could do to help women not feel so alone when they're dealing with a high risk pregnancy, what could I do? And I thought about, my background that you mentioned in writing, communication, and I said, why not have a website where women can meet one another and talk about what they're going through? And so, in the middle of the night, I thought of the name Keep 'Em Cookin' because that is the goal, to keep them cooking.
It's genius, by the way, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. Yes.
And I got out of bed right then and registered the domain name. And
Love it. I love it. And you know what I love about Keep 'Em Cooking is you've got that forum, and because it's virtual, there's always somebody that you can talk to because someone is up somewhere freaking out about the same thing you're freaking out about.
yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. So, before we go any further, for our audience members who are listening and may not know, let's take a second and let's clarify what we mean when we talk about bed rest, because I think people have a certain idea of what it means, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So, what is bed rest, and how many women, as far as you know, are on bed rest or some kind of activity limitations every year?
Okay, well, I'll answer the easy question first, which is how many women each year in the US are on some type of bed rest or activity restriction, and what to expect, and your pregnancy week by week. Both list that number as about 20% of women.
Right.
So that's about 800,000 women a year who are put on some type of activity restriction.
Which is a
And so
lot of women. I mean, that
it,
is a huge number.
it really is, and at the same time, you know, when you are on bed rest, you are the only person, you feel that you are the only person on bed rest, when
Right.
really there's this whole community out there waiting for you. And then, so to answer your second question, as far as what do we mean when we're talking about bed rest, it's challenging because it really is individual to every woman and where she is in that moment of her pregnancy. Like you said, that that in your experience, it went from being, keeping your feet up until, full on in the hospital, not allowed to get up to go to the bathroom. So that's something that every woman needs to talk to her doctor to find out what bed rest means for her. And that may mean, if you have a job where you do a lot of standing up, let's see if we can get you to sit down at a desk more often. Maybe it means reducing your work hours. Maybe it means not going up and down the stairs anymore or as much. Maybe it means, limiting your exercise routine. It just, also, avoiding intercourse with your partner. So there are these different levels. And I think, the common term that everybody uses is bed rest. But really, we're looking at it more as activity restriction. And those restrictions come with different requirements.
I think you bring up a really good point there, is how individualized it is. I think a lot of us go through this pregnancy or we're already feeling so alone. It's super overwhelming to have a high-risk pregnancy. And so we look to somebody else who's about as far along as we are, going through something similar, going, well, why is she allowed to walk around the block, but I have to stay in one room? Or why am I allowed to exercise and she's off her feet all day? And you really hit home a really important point that not only do you want to find out whether you need activity restrictions placed during your pregnancy, but exactly what kind and why. You want to make sure that you are talking to your doctor about what the motivation is and what they're hoping to improve in your pregnancy by trying these activity restrictions, because they are so unique to each and every one of us.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So why is bed rest so important for some women?
Okay, well, there are a few reasons that bed rest can be important. And so one of the number one things it does is that it can improve blood flow to the uterus, and that helps baby's growth. It can also lower the mother's blood pressure, and that again improves blood flow to the baby, which means the baby's getting more oxygen and again improved growth. So those are very specific, proven facts. Then there's also the fact that it takes pressure off of the uterus when you don't have gravity pushing the baby down.
That makes such a huge difference. I remember when I was on bed rest at home, and again, we're using the term bed rest, but we really mean activity restriction. So at that point, I believe I was about like 16, 17 weeks. I hadn't gone into preterm labor yet, but I was basically allowed to get up and take a 5-minute shower, and I was allowed to get lunch, just stand up and make myself lunch for like 5 minutes, and that was it. Otherwise, I was off my feet. And I remember one time I dropped something on the floor and I squatted down to get it, and I could feel something changing, and it really just made a huge difference.
Yes.
Right? Like, I know you and I have talked about this a lot. Like, you can tell It makes a difference sometimes. And so being off my feet really helped.
Absolutely. Yes. So even though, someone may say, well, we don't have any evidence that that there's a benefit there of keeping, the uterus from sliding down. Anyone who's felt like she's trying to hold a bowling ball inside of her vagina will tell you that relieving that sense of pressure, at minimum, it's a benefit to your sense of being able to protect your baby. It just seems natural to try to avoid that feeling of pressure.
Absolutely. Okay, so you bring up this is my favorite part of this conversation that we're going to get into right now, and I want to just dive right in, because you just brought up a really important topic, which is that bed rest has become a really controversial topic within the gynecological field. In 2015, just about 2 years ago, the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine and the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology came out and said in so many words, bed rest doesn't help. And in fact, on the ACOG's website, there's a video, a really short video, but it's on their website that says, and I quote, "Not only is there no evidence that shows that it prevents preterm birth, but it might actually cause problems. Your OBGYN will work with you to create a plan for reducing your risk of preterm birth, but bed rest should not be part of that plan." What do you think about that, Angela?
What do I think about that? Yeah. Well, first, let me say that Keep 'Em Cookin' as an organization, and me personally, I don't encourage bed rest. It should be the absolute last resort. So I don't encourage it.
Yep.
I don't endorse it. Um, you know, what keepemcookin.com does is provides support to women experiencing high risk pregnancies. And it is completely up to an individual woman and her individual doctor, to decide if it makes sense for her.
Right. I want to just pause for a second and
Mhm.
really reiterate what you just said. To all of you who are listening, it is up to you and your treating physician about what makes sense for you and your pregnancy. Nobody else should be telling you to go on bed rest or not go on bed rest or give any kind of medical advice. It is between you and your doctor. That was such an important point. I wanted to make sure we really hit that home for our listeners.
Excellent. And thank you, because that's important. We are here to provide support to women. We certainly can't
Right.
replace their medical professionals.
Definitely.
So going back to the two statements from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which we call ACOG, what they said in what they have is, they have a practice bulletin where they provide their official opinion on bed rest for the prevention of preterm birth. And they say that it routinely should not be prescribed. Well, absolutely. I don't think it should ever be routine. And I don't
Right.
think anyone is saying. And then it's interesting because the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine also used that same terminology. They said, bed rest should not be practiced routinely. Well, of course, bed rest is for the most serious conditions. So the problem with the official recommendations provided by ACOG and provided by the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine is that they don't define what bed rest is. So we're back to that challenge where we understand that those organizations say, we can't routinely recommend bed rest. But what about, can you say there are times when it is appropriate to limit a woman's level of activity? Are there times when it makes sense to have her take a break from her job? Does it make sense to have her avoid intercourse? There's way too much to be left for interpretation in those recommendations.
Right. And it goes back to what we just said, which is every pregnancy is unique. Every woman is different. And even if she and her neighbor have the exact same complications, the way it presents is completely different. And so
Correct.
to me, it goes back to exactly what you were saying, that you can't have a blanket statement of everyone must do this or everybody must not do this. But you have to have a conversation, and an in-depth conversation with your doctor about your particular pregnancy. And it's okay to go to your doctor and say, hey, my neighbor is also 26 weeks pregnant. She's also having a shortened cervix, and our doctor put her on the sofa, basically. Why am I not doing that? And it's okay to ask that, but you need to ask your doctor that and find out where they're coming from.
Absolutely. Yep. Yes.
So, why do you think some doctors and these major organizations discount bed rest?
Hmm. My answer for this is probably going to be a long one.
Okay.
um, so, so first, the reason that ACOG and SMFM have given for not supporting the use of bed rest is that they have said there's no scientific evidence to show that bed rest prevents preterm birth. And that is true. We do not have absolute scientific proof that bed rest will prevent preterm birth. So what's interesting is that the SFMF themselves have said that only one trial on bed rest has met the criteria for what's called a Cochrane review. And the Cochrane reviews are these internationally recognized studies, or I should say opinions, taking, the most, the people most well versed in the topic, and they review all of the studies on a particular topic, and then they make a conclusion based on all of those studies. Well, so for the Cochrane Review, they found that only one trial has ever met their standards. So if I can tell you about this study, so it was called the West Los Angeles Preterm Birth Prevention Project, and it included women from only 8 clinics, all of them in Los Angeles.
Huh. So a really wide sample there.
Well, it's only women from Los Angeles.
Right.
Yeah, okay, you're being sarcastic. Okay, yes. Yes. So we're looking only at women who live in West Los Angeles County. That's what it was. So what happened is, there were 432 women who were prescribed bed rest at home, and 422 who had no intervention. And what's interesting, I'm sorry, there's also a third group of about 400 women who were in a placebo group, and I have no idea what the placebo is for bed rest.
That is very interesting. I have no idea how you have placebo bed rest.
I don't know, but if there's a way for me to be thinking that I'm relaxing but not relaxing and actually getting things done, I'm in. So just to be clear, we had these 3 groups. So we're looking at a group of 432 women who live in Los Angeles. That's what all of the research is based on. And, or I should say, this conclusion is based on 432 women who lived in Los Angeles. So ultimately, the results were really similar in that, 7.9% of women in the bed rest group delivered before 37 weeks. And then 8.5% of women in the other 2 groups delivered before 37 weeks. So we are comparing 7.9 to 8.5.
So essentially very similar. I mean, there isn't a significant difference.
Yes, exactly. Very similar. So, but how do we proclaim, how do we make this grand generalization based on 400 women?
Absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, how are you going to run these studies either? Are you really going to go to a woman who has a cervix of 2 millimeters left at 22 weeks saying, hey, would you like to be in a group that doesn't do bed rest and see what happens? I mean, I would run as far away from that as possible.
Yes, no one would ever agree to that study. And so let's say they even say, like, you know what, we'll give you $1,000 to be in this study. Well, how do you measure compliance?
Absolutely.
Sure, you can pretend that you're going to be the person who hasn't gotten terrible news about their pregnancy and will go home and not do anything about it, but you're not going to go on with your life, even if you're in the control group, you're not going to go on with your life the way you would have. So what's interesting is there was a study that showed that there were benefits. So let me kind of recap. So, those 2 organizations say that there's no scientific evidence for bed rest, even though we don't know exactly what bed rest is. So we shouldn't prescribe it. And then so the second reason that they say bed rest shouldn't be used is the exact same reason, but let me explain why it's different. So they say, again, there's no scientific evidence to show that bed rest prevents preterm birth. But here's the problem. They are looking for an answer for full-on prevention of preterm birth as the measure of success. Well, to a mother, preventing preterm birth isn't the only measure of success.
Right.
If you are a woman at 22 weeks who has been told she's at high risk, if you make it to 27 weeks, you're thrilled.
Absolutely. I mean, that was exactly my experience. I went into preterm labor at 18 weeks, and to make it to 24 plus 5 was almost unheard of. And of course, would I have wanted him to come later? Of course. I would have done anything to make it to 25, 26, 30. It doesn't matter. But the fact is that he was able to stay in long enough to survive.
Yes. 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 So how you define success is different for every woman.
Absolutely.
So many women will say, yes, for me, bed rest worked because I was able to get the steroid shots. I was able to continue my pregnancy with preeclampsia another 2 weeks because bed rest lowered my blood pressure. So I think that's the thing. I think we're looking at the wrong metric of what success is.
That's a very interesting point. So you're basically saying, and I think I agree with you, that the perspective from the researchers and the doctors and these organizations is very different than the perspective of moms who are actually going through it. And that's not being taken into consideration when there's this blanket statement, which again goes back to exactly what we said a little while ago, which is you can't follow general rules because pregnancy is unique for everyone. So you have to talk to your doctor.
Yes. And if I could share a couple more facts, there was a study that came out last year that essentially got no publicity other than on Keep 'Em Cookin, and this was huge. So this was called the Maternal Bed Rest and Infant Health Study. And you ready for this? It looked at data collected from more than 200,000 women across the United States. Not 400 women who lived in Los Angeles, but 200,000 women who lived throughout the United States who experienced a range of problems during pregnancy. So, I mean, this is a one of a kind study.
Yeah.
And what makes this study so legitimate is women were asked the questions after delivery, and they were not part of a study on bed rest. They were simply asked about their pregnancies. So there was no bias. People were simply asked about their pregnancies and did you have any of the following conditions? So here's the exciting thing. The study showed that for those women who had some level of limited activity, it reduced their likelihood of preterm birth before 33 weeks by a minimum of 7.7%.
Isn't that amazing?
It definitely made a difference to them. And so if there's something that I personally can do that has a statistical chance of helping me get my baby to 33 weeks or beyond, I would want my doctor to tell me about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, some of you who are listening to this might be thinking, well, these numbers aren't that big. I'm not so sure whether this is really that helpful or not. And, I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who are listening to what SMFM, ACOG, some of their doctors who are discouraging bed rest and might be thinking, yeah, the risks of bone loss, muscle loss, even depression are bad enough that I don't want to try that. And, what I want to say here is it's confusing and I get it. You're already in a difficult position. You've got a high-risk pregnancy. You're overwhelmed. You're scared for your baby. And then to hear all this conflicting information, it's really the last thing that you need. So what's really important is that you speak with your doctor about why they're recommending what they're recommending. And if it doesn't feel right to you, or if you want to know more options, it is absolutely your right to get a second opinion just to get enough information. That's really critical for you to make sure that you have all the information you need to make the best decision for your pregnancy. So Angela, I'm curious though, if a woman does go to her doctor and he or she says, I don't recommend bed rest for you, what should she say to that doctor? What do you recommend?
Well, I think it's challenging because I think a lot of people hesitate to question their doctors. And so, I think, you have to listen to your gut and part of it is doing what feels right to you and doing what feels right to you at that moment. You have to listen to your body. So suppose that your doctor, says, bed rest isn't right for you. Ask then, what is right for me? What else can I be doing? Are there medications that I can be on? Are there tests that you can do to continue to track my level of risk?
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. Right. And this is why I do the work that I do, is because I really strongly believe there's so many things that you can manage in your lifestyle, whether it includes bed rest or not, that can also lower your risk. And so it's really important that you talk to your doctor about all of that. If there's one thing that you can tell women who are on bed rest on how to survive it, what would you say?
I would really think that you don't want to shut yourself off from the rest of the world. And I think that happens a lot because you're not in a good place. You're not, you may not feel like being around other people. You may feel frumpy, you may feel blah, but I think the worst thing you can do is shut yourself off from the rest of the world.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. You know, bed rest it's a really unique and really difficult to understand experience until you've been through it. And you'll see that if you're on it already, your friends and family maybe aren't quite understanding of what you're going through. And you may recognize that, gosh, I never knew it was hard in these many different ways until you've been through it yourself. The most important thing that you can do is to notice your symptoms, listen to your body, pay attention to what's happening to your body, and talk to your doctor about it. If they're not recommending something that's in line with your maternal instinct, your gut, whatever you want to call it, it is your right to get a second opinion. You have to have all the information. Your doctor is a consultant on your pregnancy, but you are the expert on your body. Angela, I could talk to you about this for hours.
Yes, so
and
could I.
so I would love to continue this at some point. But for now, for our listeners, what are your final words of wisdom for women who are trying to educate themselves about bed rest and how to have a healthier, high-risk pregnancy?
Okay. Well, a lot of it goes back to, what I was saying is, don't cut yourself off. Look for places where you can get support, like people like you. If you're someone who has, already been seeing, if you've seen a therapist in the past, this is a great time to reconnect with them. And then of course, talking to other women who are experiencing what you're experiencing. And I would just say, don't give up, because I have seen so many amazing success stories through the Keep 'Em Cookin website, and just time and again I've seen women at 20 weeks, 22 weeks go on to 37 weeks and even 40 weeks. So get emotional support, stay in contact with your healthcare provider, and stay in contact with the outside world.
I love it. I love it. And where can people find you?
Well, let's see. The easiest place to find me is www.keepemcookin.com. And then you can also communicate with other women, other Keep 'Em Cookin moms, through Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest. So just search for Keep 'Em Cookin on those different social media accounts.
Fantastic. You are doing such amazing work for these women, and I so appreciate you and everything that you do. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for what you do too.
Oh my gosh, this topic, I could talk about this for hours. I love the work that she's doing, but it really just, I think the big takeaway for me is I want to make this experience for you as simple and easy as possible. And because the last thing you need is conflicting information. So it all starts with you, right? The research can say what it wants, doctors can say what it wants, but it's your pregnancy and it's your baby. It's your baby's life. So take the time to pay attention to your body. If you notice that standing up makes you contract and lying down doesn't, take note of that. If you notice that walking around or having a lot of visitors makes your blood pressure go up or your sugar levels go up, make note of that and talk to your doctor about it. And don't be afraid to get a second or a third opinion, because nobody cares about your baby as much as you do. No one's going to fight for your baby as much as you are. So don't take the first piece of medical advice that you get and just run with it without thinking about whether it fits for you and your pregnancy. Now, I know that can feel really overwhelming too. Like, I'm not a doctor, what do I know? But you don't have to be a doctor to know what's right for your body, because you're the expert on your body. You've lived in it for decades. You know what feels good, and you know how to tell that. So don't discount that. There's always going to be research that is conflicting. I mean, there was all that new research about, does sugar make you fat? Does fat make you fat? And all of a sudden we figured out that it's really sugar this whole time. That's going to happen. But ultimately, it's about you and your baby and what feels right for you right now. And I love that we were able to talk about that. And I wish we had more time. But I hope that this was helpful so far, because it's the start of a very important conversation. So just to reiterate again, before we close out for today, if your doctor doesn't recommend bed rest and you feel that you might benefit from it, or if you notice that your symptoms improve with limited activity, bring it up to your doctor and then get a second opinion. It's your right, and it's important that you do it so you make an informed decision, so you know you did everything you could when your baby is born. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I had such a blast having Angela on and introducing you to her and the amazing work that she's doing, and talking to you about a really important topic that's really confusing right now, but breaking that down into what I hope is going to be an easier way for you to understand what's best for you and your baby. If you want to know more about how to get through bed rest, or if you'd like to schedule an appointment, please visit my website at parijatdeshpande.com. That's ParijatDeshpande.com. And I'd also love to stay in touch. So follow me on Twitter or on Instagram at Parijat Desh. That's ParijatDesh. And I'd love to stay in touch with you there. The last thing that you need during a high-risk pregnancy is conflicting, confusing, contradictory information. That's why it's best to go to the source, your body. Listen to what your body's saying, and then advocate for yourself to find a doctor who will trust your body too. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.